Chen, and joining me are
Devendra Hardawar.
Jeff Kanata.
and joining us today, he is a writer, producer, and director who's the co-creator of shows such as Master of None and an executive producer of Little America, which is available right now on Apple TV Plus. His newest film, Tigertail, is streaming right now on Netflix. Alan Yang, welcome to the Slash Filmcast. Alan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for this wonderful change of plans as to which movie we're talking about.
So, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, first of all, you can find more episodes of this podcast at slashfilmcast.com. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. And today, on last week's episode of the podcast, I had announced that we were going to be reviewing Memories of Murder, a movie that, let's just say, is difficult to watch in the United States right now.
It's not difficult to watch. It's difficult to find to be able to watch.
Correct.
I mean, it may also be difficult to watch, but
a difficult movie to find, a movie that our listeners went to great lengths to procure in order to prepare for this episode. At the same time that we were really psyched to talk about Bong Joon-ho's second film, which is a terrifying examination of the first South Korean serial killer case ever. At the same time as we were all ready for that, Alan Yang said, "Hey," he messaged me. He's like, "Hey, you know what? I think that in these challenging and uncertain times we're going through, it might be a better idea to review something that isn't wildly depressing, right, Alan? Tell us about your thought process."
That was essentially it. So I obviously am a big Bong Joon-ho fan, and that Memories of Murder is a great film. But I just figured, figuring about what we're all kind of going through right now, I thought maybe instead of hearing me talk about, Memories of Murder is like, it's kind of like Manhunter, but with Tarkovsky references. It's like instead of that for 2 hours or whatever, it's like, why don't we talk about a really silly, goofy movie from the early 90s that me and my friends talk about all the time? Like literally
that everybody's
just,
seen.
that everybody's seen, and it's a kind of this goofy big tent, that kind of mid 90s movie that just doesn't exist anymore, where they were just they were cranking these out every week, it seemed like, and it has big stars in it. It's insane. I wouldn't say it's good necessarily, but I have some thoughts on it, and I just wanted to talk about it. I thought it'd be fun for everyone.
All right.
Also, I think Alan realized that we are slowly transitioning into a Dennis Leary career oeuvre podcast.
Yes.
So we did Judgment Night, and now Demolition Man is next. We're just moving through early '90s Dennis Leary joints.
Take that, blank check.
I know this is going to become a Dennis Leary podcast so fast, you guys won't even.
We won't even
realize it.
We're like the frog being boiled alive. So, Alan, before we get to talking about Demolition Man, you have just released a new film that you wrote, directed, and produced. It's called Tigertail. It's available right now on Netflix. Tell us about this movie that you worked on.
Yes, very proud of this movie. I've been working on it for a few years. It is essentially the exact opposite in tone from Demolition Man. It is a sort of it's a quiet and reserved family drama about a Taiwanese immigrant who moves from Taiwan to America in the 70s, and it's about his struggles with his family and his inability to communicate with his daughter, with a lot of sort of Wong Kar-wai, Edward Yang, and Ho Xiaoshen references with how his life is lived in Taiwan in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So it is not a big budget mid 90s movie with cheesy special effects, but it is very personal to me. It's inspired by the story of my family, in particular my dad's story, where he grew up in a small town in Taiwan and worked in a sugar factory before coming to America and living in the Bronx. So it is. I've been really thrilled by the response, obviously from the Asian American community, but really everybody. If you've ever fallen in love or had an argument with your dad, or made a choice you regretted and sort of thought about for the rest of your life, movie applies to you. So
I've done all three of those things. So
there you
indeed,
go.
Indeed, I was
Hope
very
you check
taken to the film, and my father came from a very similar situation, so I was very struck by some of the personal elements of the film. And actually, I spend about 30, 40 minutes talking with Alan about the movie on my other podcast, Culturally Relevant. So if you want to listen to an in-depth deep dive on that, check out Culturally Relevant. But, that's not what we're here for today. We're here to dive into Demolition Man. And
I
then here,
hope you
I'm gonna
can
put
hear yeah, here you can hear the excitement in my voice.
and I'll put the trailer for Demolition Man right here at this point in time. Okay. All right. Okay. That was from the trailer for Demolition Man, the 1993 film directed by Marco Brambilla. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. A police officer is brought out of suspended animation in prison to pursue an old ultraviolet nemesis who is loose in a non-violent future society. Now, yeah, this movie came out almost 3 decades ago, which really, we're dating ourselves when we're talking about this movie coming out when we were kids.
Yeah. We are almost to the time when cryogenically frozen John Spartan has awoken. Like, this is where we are right now. It's kind of insane.
I remember
We're
when this
almost
movie
there.
first came out, everything about it seemed outlandish. I mean, who could have imagined that one day in the future, people felt like they could be casually racist to Asians, there'd be no more toilet paper, and people would avoid physical contact for fear of spreading disease? It is
Perfect.
ridiculous how much this movie got right. Anyway, Alan, rewatching this movie, what parts of it resonated most with you?
So rewatching it, I always knew, even as a kid, again, there's a caveat that when you're a kid and you watch something, you're like 10 years old, you watch something, things about this movie stick in your brain in a way that of course they wouldn't if you're an adult, because you'd watch it and you'd probably be like, well, this is kind of nonsense, and forget about it for the rest of your life. But in this situation, I will make the argument that this movie contains way more memorable scenes, ideas, and images that it has any right to. And let me make that argument for 1 second, because even on the rewatch, it's like, some of these ideas are either really funny, really catchy, really interesting. Something about them has always sort of resonated, and like me and my friends talk about it, and we all get these jokes. And I don't think it was that massive a movie. I mean, it was a pretty big hit, and it's obviously not a classic. We're not talking about Terminator 2 or Total Recall or those really sort of classic movies from the 90s. This was kind of a middle of the road movie, but it has these weird ideas. So let me just go through a couple of them that struck me on the rewatch. The idea that Taco Bell is the only restaurant, I think, is a thing that people just remember about the movie. That's also tied into the idea that the only popular songs that are played on the radio are commercial jingles. And these two ideas.
Can we get the prequel film that's all about the franchise wars?
I mean, I love that idea. Like, what, it just raises so
Crazy.
many questions. It's just
What's
we're
a
almost there, by the
franchise
way.
war? I want to watch that movie. I want to know how Taco Bell defeats everyone in the franchise wars. Give me that backstory.
We have the fancy Taco Bells. I don't know if you guys have been to the Taco Bell cantinas, but
I've been to a Taco
yeah,
Bell cantina.
there you go.
I went to one in Cleveland when I was there for the NBA Finals one year. Anyway, that's a side story. But yeah, I think in those prequels, Taco Bell is the underdog, and it takes down McDonald's and Burger King.
Yeah.
It's part of the Yum franchise. It just comes out of nowhere and stabs them in the back. But yeah, that idea kind of dovetails with the idea that all the popular songs are commercial jingles. It comes with this crazy cameo. Again, if you're a child of the 90s, MTV Sports' Dan Cortez is in a Taco Bell singing the Jolly Green Giant jingle, and you never see him again. It's never referenced. You just see him. It just comes out of nowhere. It's really crazy. I mean, it's really just like, why cast him? A couple other things that are really memorable. The sex scene between Sylvester Stallone and Sandra Bullock, where they wear helmets and don't touch each other, that is definitely seared into my brain from when I was a kid. It's just a weird, like, I don't know, it's just like a memorable
VR
scene.
sex is here, by the way. VR porn. It's all
Yeah,
of it. Yeah.
that exists. That was eerily prescient. And then pretty much everything about Simon Phoenix, the character played by Wesley Snipes. I mean, his blonde hairdo, his death scene. That spoiler alert, he dies in the movie. But the image of him just getting frozen by that weird stick weapon thing, and then his head being kicked off. Like, I'll just never forget that image. And I don't know
whatever
why.
special effects guy decided to add some red in the
Yeah.
interior.
Yes, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
It's horrifying. I remember that red. I watched it again today. It was like, oh my God. It's like, it's really, I don't know. It's troubling when you watch it. And then just one final thing. Of course, I had to mention the three seashells. Just an immortal I guess you want to call it a joke, but it's just a kind of idea that everyone, not everyone, but people our age kind of are conversant with. Again, in a movie that, had no right to sort of infiltrate the cultural consciousness in the way that I did. Like, kind of made me think, what movie of this level has that many memorable ideas in it?
By the way,
I mean,
that's also sort of prescient because we are heading towards the bidet, toilet seat rage. I have one. I've had one for a couple of years.
Oh.
Every time people come over, I have to explain how to use the damn bidet because they're like, "What do you do with these three sheets? What do you do with these buttons?" It's the same thing. I have to write instructions and put them next to the little remote control just so people won't get confused. It's amazing.
Yeah, I wonder if the writer of this movie had gone to Japan or something. Used a Toto,
And this is literally a $70 million, which at that time was real money, $70 million summer blockbuster tentpole movie that ends with a poop joke. The last line is a poop joke.
They know what they had on their hands. They knew what they had. They knew that would be the most memorable thing in the whole movie. Okay, so just a couple other thoughts, and I'll let you guys go because I could talk about the movie forever. A tiny rant on Wesley Snipes in the movie. I don't know that I've ever seen a broader performance ever in any movie, and that's not even a criticism. Like it's an observation, might be even a compliment. Like he's essentially playing a cartoon villain or just a cartoon. Period. It's like it's crazier than Jim Carrey's performance of The Mask in some ways. At one point, he's in this museum and he walks by some Asian kids and he says "Ching Chong, Ching Chong." Then he takes a random guy, just a passerby, and who did nothing to him and slams his head into a wall. Then he picks up a third guy and throws through the wall. This is just like in the middle of the movie. Like this is not a scene to like illustrate his character or anything. This is just who he is. And later on he gets electrocuted and he shakes it off. It's almost a Jar Jar Binks like he goes with his lips. Like he does that. Like that's the take they use. They put that in the movie. It's his performance as Simon Phoenix is an iconic performance. Also, just a side note, I just watched White Men Can't Jump, and I saw that it came out the year before. And in my head, like my head canon is that Wesley's character from that movie, Sidney Dean, fell on hard times in the basketball game, dyed his hair blonde, and evolved into Simon Phoenix.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch the movie with that in mind.
Amazing. I will say that when this movie first came out, I was basically a kid. And Simon Phoenix at the time was actually pretty terrifying to me. This idea that this guy was basically a sociopath and could just murder people with impunity. Now I see his performance as what you're describing, that it's quite silly and over the top. But he was one of the first depictions of kind of a psychopath that I had ever seen in my life that scared me, at the time.
I agree. I think I was scared by him too. And I don't think this is crazy. I think he's a predecessor of the Heath Ledger Joker because he has no morals. He just is he's a chaos agent,
Yeah.
And it's like that's his character. They're very specific about how he doesn't really have any desires. I guess he wants power vaguely, but he really just wants to kill everyone, which I think is scary as a kid.
Yeah.
It does seem like he's playing the Joker. I mean, even down to the wardrobe choices, it's like, oh, this is kind of the Joker right here.
Mhm. His outfits are it's very Beetlejuice too. The striped black and white pants. Like there's a lot. And then the guy from Beetlejuice is in this movie too. The what was it? The psychic from Beetlejuice.
Yes, that's right. And I had just one kind of further rant about the movie that is just related to why it felt weird to watch it today. And I don't know if you guys noticed this. I think David, alluded to some of these ideas, but it was borderline scary how much of the movie was directly applicable to the coronavirus epidemic, which is very, it's very early in the movie. Rob Schneider's in the movie. Rob Schneider, and
one of his
Benjamin
best
Bratt.
roles, I would say.
I'm always pleasantly surprised when he pops up. I'm like, I can't believe he's in this movie. They greet each other and they do an air high five where they do like circles in the air, and then later they say they don't touch. And later they say in the movie, we are not used to physical contact greetings. Again, coronavirus, very relevant. There are several scenes that take place in the movie, like in conference rooms, and everyone's appearing on these like weird metal pillars with video screens on them, which are essentially Zoom meetings, which is we're all doing them all the time now, right? And after the sex scene, Sandra Bullock says a very kind of scary thing, which is like she's like the exchange of bodily fluids is banned. Do you know what that leads to? It leads to NRS and UBT and all, like lists all these diseases. Like, what is going on here? Like, is Demolition Man like just like do they know what's happening? And of course there's no toilet paper as Dave talked about. But yeah, it was weird watching it today. Did you guys notice that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. A lot of parallels. I had to look up NRS and UBT. Like, are those real things we should be afraid of? But I don't think they are. I think they're just made up for this. But let's go to Devindra. Devindra, what were your thoughts watching this movie again?
It's an experience. I remember seeing this movie as a kid, and it was not in my rotation of movies I watched a crap ton of, like Mortal Kombat or something. Like, it was never a legendary, but my wife loves this movie. Like, she's a huge fan. We have a Blu-ray, so I was all ready for us to do this review. And it's it's a fun thing to review or to watch right now, because not only is it applicable, it is so like it's such a 90s action movie where certain things are so lazy, where like the action itself is lazy, where they don't really care about like giant set pieces or anything. And it's all just kind of noisy and messy. And then Wesley Snipes comes in as like this saving grace of like energy. His choreography is so good. Every move he does is amazing. I believe there's a story going around since then that he was moving too fast for the camera at the time, like for the shutter speed or whatever. So he had to slow down for the camera to actually catch him, which is a thing that does happen in martial arts movies, I guess. But just kind of funny. It breaks my heart to see he has a great opening fight scene with like 5 or 6 different cops, and every single punch and kick is a different cut, and it just man, give me like that uncut take. Yeah, exactly. So I think he's the saving grace. The random racist bit, which just feels like an ad lib, and I don't know if I don't feel like that's in the script. That feels like part of the chaotic energy that Wesley Snipes puts in there. But I just start thinking about that, because I was like, even if he's a bad guy, the things he does we shouldn't be doing, but it did feel just very strange, just very like flippant in terms of how like nefarious it is too. And I had to think like, man, the director must have been okay with this. The producer must have been okay with this. The studio was fine with it. All the test audiences who saw this were fine with it. And it's like, this goes all the way to the top. Like this one scene is like, we're totally okay with Asian racism, in the 90s. And hey, I experienced a ton of that too as a kid. So it reminded me of that. So there was that bit.
Yeah.
But I think all the feature stuff, like just how prescient it is really interesting. This does feel like a Daniel Waters movie at times, and he is one of my favorite screenwriters of that era. Like, how can you not love him? Heathers, Batman Returns, Hudson Hawk. All movies I really, really loved as a kid. Like Batman Returns is a big one for me. So there are so many interesting ideas in this movie. I do appreciate that, even if it is basically a lazy action movie saved by one great performance.
Well, a couple of things I want to respond to that you just said, Devindra. I mean, I agree with you that the action is edited to within an inch of its life. And I think that something I read, The Matrix had its 20th anniversary recently, and I read a retrospective. I think it was Chad Stahelski that was talking about how after The Matrix, people took martial arts in action films seriously, right?
Yes.
Like, that before The Matrix, it was just like there's a lot of hand-to-hand fighting, but it was mostly just pretty unremarkable choreography. Whereas after The Matrix, American films started integrating martial arts a lot more, and we see that to this day with the John Wick series. And I definitely recognize that, the action is overall pretty unremarkable. But I will say, in my opinion, the stunts look awesome.
Sure,
and particularly the opening action scene, which...
That bungee jump?
The bungee I mean, that could be a parody of a 80s, 90s action film. That entire first 5 to 10 minutes, right?
I love the opening. It's the ending of another movie. It's the final action scene of another movie. This movie opens with, and I respect that.
Yeah, and it's also a very interesting thing. I wasn't sure what year they set everything in, and they open on what looks like a kind of crazy apocalyptic hellscape version of LA, and it says LA 1996 because it was like
Yeah.
3 years in the future. It's like, oh my God, they think in '96 it's gonna be that, and they also have perfect cryogenic technology, which is funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so-
Oh, also
Yeah,
in
go ahead.
regards to the martial arts, I read that the Simon Phoenix part was originally going to be played by Jackie Chan, which is crazy. I
Mm.
think
wow.
very-
Instead,
very
they
There's
had
a
to
shout
settle
out
for-
to him at the
Yeah,
end.
they had to
shout
settle
out,
for a
yeah.
shout out to him. So then the whole thing where he bungee jumps, it reminds me of like the beginning of GoldenEye, you know, when 007 jumps down the thing, the dam with the bungee cord and everything. And then at the end of the
My
action
favorite thing
scene-
about that, by the way, really quick, Dave,
Yeah.
since you brought it up, my favorite thing about that is that the bungee cord does not recoil. It's clearly a bungee cord, but he just like gets to the bottom of it, and that's where he stays.
Yes, it's that's how they generally work in these movies. And
Last
then
action hero physics. Yeah.
And then at the end, they blow up the entire building that Simon Phoenix used to occupy. And I got to say, that explosion looks awesome. And it reminded me of a time when we did a lot of these things practically. Like, if they made this movie today, which they wouldn't, but if they did, they would do that explosion of what seems to be like a building the size of a city block in CG, is my guess, right?
Yeah, and it reminds me also of like I just watched some tweet video of like the models in Con Air. Like they had a small model sized Las Vegas, and they landed a plane on it. And I don't think they would never do that now. It would be all
Yeah,
in
it'd be all
VFX. It'd
CG.
be
It'd be easier to do that.
previs months before the shoot even happened. You know.
Did you use a lot of CG in Tigertail, Alan, or was that mostly
Yeah,
practical?
What people don't know is that we use the Irishman technology on every actor in the movie. So,
Very
it was a $390 million movie.
Wow. Bold
We
choice.
we have Ty Ma playing a 5-year-old boy in it. So yeah.
Bold choice. Anyway, yeah, so I will say, even though the action doesn't look particularly great when it comes to the shootouts and the hand-to-hand fights, I think the stunt work is awesome, and I think they blew up stuff real good in the 90s. And I did get a sense of what a big-budget 90s action film could be. By the way, we should say this movie didn't do particularly well when it first came out. It only made around $50 million or so at the domestic box office. But I read an interview recently with the screenwriter, which I might talk about more later, where he says that sometimes he gets drunk and he'll Google his own movies with the word underrated before the movie title. Right? He'll Google underrated Demolition Man or underrated whatever else he's made. And he says that's the one that always has the most results. You know, is that this was a movie
Yeah, first one. Yeah.
whose
Fancy
brilliance is
that.
not recognized in its own
Whatever
time.
makes you sleep at night, pal.
I just love the image of him doing that like twice a day.
He says when he gets drunk. To his defense. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
twice a day.
gotta defend the action in the movie a little bit. But Jeff Canada, what did you think about Demolition Man?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say my thoughts about Demolition Man are best summed up in the form of a limerick.
Amazing.
If this movie is just outdated poo, I'll need to know what those seashells do. Yes, it poorly aged, but also presaged Red America's fear of blue.
Ooh.
Wow, topical, Jeffrey. Topical.
Yes.
I could not help but notice that this movie is a friggin' allegory for America today.
Hmm.
It is literally this conglomeration of California that is San Diego has morphed with San Francisco and LA to become like the most California thing, where everyone doesn't eat meat and doesn't say bad words and doesn't smoke or eat red meat or
No spicy food. No spicy food.
no spicy. It is all, everything is bad that is bad is banned, and everything that makes you a real man, a real American red-blooded man, is completely been removed from the future. It is the vision of the future that I think a large part of this country is literally terrified of.
The vegans have won. Yes.
Yes.
The pussyification of America.
Yes.
This is what the movie is. It says Sylvester Stallone is a real man who likes fucking hot rod cars and guns and like all the shit that real men are supposed to like.
He's the good guy, and
I know,
he's the
he's
Demolition
what-
Man. He's the good guy, and they call him Demolition Man. Okay.
Yes, he's the good guy, but I think you're right, Jeff. He's almost the political version of Tim Allen in Last Man Standing. I think he kind of
Yes.
espouses similar views, but
Yes,
it was
he's
30 years ago.
pure concentrated red America injected into a future where blue America won. Like, and I think that, to me, I can't not see this movie that way. Like when I watched it, by the way, you guys are making me feel very old because I worked at a movie theater when this movie came out. I was a junior in high school. And when I saw this movie, that idea, and I went back and I tried to Google some reviews of this movie. I read the Rolling Stone review and the Variety review. And while both of them were pretty down on the movie, saying it's schlock, none of them pointed out any kind of political overtones, where it seems so irrefutable, unignorable, that this movie is like about this horrible feeling of losing that macho American spine, and they want to take away your guns, they want to take away your manhood. They inject the knowledge of how to knit into Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it weirdly conflates fascism with like effete liberalism.
Yes.
Like literally, that's what they're doing. And Sandra Bullock has a speech where she's like, alcohol, caffeine, contact sports, meat, and gasoline are banned. And it's like, that's insane. That's not insane, number one. And then number two, like they give that same speech to Dennis Leary later. He says the same thing. Like Dennis Leary goes off on a crazy Dennis Miller like rant about how they take, it's like they're taking away essentially your manhood. I mean, that's what he says too.
I mean, we talked about the Dennis Leary-ness of the 90s when we talked about Judgment Night, but you are so right, Alan. They literally just plugged Dennis Leary's stand-up act into this movie because people don't remember Dennis Leary in the 90s because he's had such a prolific film career and television career, but he was a chain-smoking stand-up comic who ranted about, he had a stand-up special that was very famous called No Cure for Cancer, where he ranted about, I'm smoking, it's going to kill me, fuck you. That was his whole bit. It was like these rants about like, I'm eating red meat, I'm smoking cigarettes, I don't care, get it, put it in me. And it's like verbatim that moment. He doesn't even exist in this movie other than to do that. And I was so reminded of this like Joel Silver equation for making a tentpole movie in the early 90s, like pre-Matrix. The Joel Silver playbook was like, plug in the bits so that the sum is equal to the sum. There's no greater than the sum of its parts. It's literally, here's the parts, hopefully there's a big sum. They don't mesh together. Like you have Rob Schneider in this movie playing his character from Saturday Night Live,
Yes.
Yeah, he literally has that little headset that he wears when he plays that character in Saturday Night Live. He's doing the same shtick. This movie has a song by Sting called Demolition Man that only exists in the credits because in the 90s you needed a big music star to record the theme song for your movie. None of the parts make any fucking sense together. And like what's Benjamin Bratt doing?
I know. It's really crazy what he's doing in the movie. I don't know.
This movie is bonkers, but you're so right, Alan, that none of that is what I remember. What I remember is that the crazy cryogenic death that Wesley Snipes has. I remember the crazy explosions and Sylvester Stallone going nuts. And I remember like feeling like the future was so wild and interesting, and the three seashells and all of that stuff that is indelible. It stays in your mind because you're like, oh yeah. And it's because this was made at a time when movies that talked about what was happening in the future still had kind of a rosy outlook on the humanity. It seems crazy to think that we literally don't have movies now that have a positive idea of what the future could be. But right now it's all apocalypse. It's all the worst shit. It's all, the planet is dying. Every single movie that talks about the future, that's the future it's such a dour, down, sad thing. that when I was a kid, all the movies about the future were like Back to the Future Part 2 and Demolition Man, all these movies and Total Recall, all these movies where the future, yeah, it had scary shit in it, but it was mostly a utopia. In the future, all we had to do is get to the future and technology was going to save us all. And I kind of miss that aspect of it too.
Yeah.
Is this feeling of maybe some some hope.
Well, let me
I
throw
would
this
submit
at you
y-
though, Jeff.
you
Like
know.
just real quick. We are living in that future. Ain't so rosy, buddy. And so
Well, I would
No, I
submit,
know.
right now.
Jeffrey.
Yeah,
I would
I know
submit to you
why.
that it's actually not that positive. The future depicted here.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I think that Dennis Leary has a great point when he's talking about how everything that you're doing is predetermined, and actually, to this day, literally, I mean, season 3 of Westworld is dealing with this exact topic, where
Mhm.
an external force or an algorithm or a person or whatever, some kind of system, is dictating what your future is going to be, and it might look rosy and nice on the outside, but it hides something more sinister.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
I would
I
say,
don't
yeah,
think
on
it's
the
not-
outside it looks nice, but like it's rotten to the core, Jeff. Is
Well,
what
I
say.
would not suggest that it is not dystopian. I would suggest that there's a feeling that humanity is doing okay as a species, is what I mean to say. Not, which I don't think we even get anymore. Because as a kid, you get the 1984 of it all, right? You understand the 1984 of it, and that's part and parcel with a big action movie where someone from the past has to save the future.
Mhm.
But you also feel like subtract that element and shit is rad. It got self-driving cars right, which is pretty cool. It got like Alan was saying, it's got screens and it got video conferencing and it got a lot of those things right. And as a kid I felt like yeah, I can't wait for that. That's going to be amazing.
yeah.
And I just don't feel like our fiction does that anymore.
It's
doesn't
not
even
as
have-
aspirational it
it can still be dystopian. It can still have problems that need to be overcome by the heroes of the fiction. But all of our problems seem to be literally surviving the dystopic wasteland of,
Yeah.
the
Well, we get the
lack
pop
of resource.
culture of our times. Like, we get the pop culture that reflects with the time we live in. And I think you look at what the past 20 years have been, Jeff. It's all been pretty apocalyptic for a while. Yeah. So
I mean,
it's kind of how we're doing
I
that.
get it.
Yeah.
But I would love some of our fiction to fight against the grain a bit and actually
Yeah,
present,
yeah.
I don't know.
I hear you. Let me take your political allegory like one step further, Jeff. Like, to me, it's not just even the liberals winning and taking over. It is a very white liberal version of the world, right? No spicy food. As soon as they said that, I'm like, where's everybody else, buddy? I guess you're calling Taco Bell your best restaurants, and I guess if you don't actually like real food from brown people, I guess that is the best restaurant you can come up with. So it is like, to me, even as a kid, I was like, I don't want to live here. This world seems boring. Like, I was totally on board with Sandra Bullock's character. I was like, this world seems boring and dull, and nobody can do what they want to do. Like, it's so restricting in many ways. And you don't really you see like one or two people of color in the police department, but not really out in the world. Not until like you get underground. It's like, oh, that's where the brown people are. That's
and it's retrograde in so many ways.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just that. It's like, so I actually think a couple things about her character, very subtly named Lenina Huxley, like the author of Brave New World, Aldous Huxley. But I do actually like they did some work in sort of setting her character up. They're like, this character loves the 20th century. Like, I thought that was just like a smart thing, right? She has a Red Hot Chili Peppers album up in her office, which is hilarious.
She loves the 20th century, just has terrible taste about what it
Exactly.
Lethal Weapon 3.
Yeah.
and so
Oh,
and they set her up, right? And I think we're conditioned a little bit to have seen movies with, three-dimensional characters who aren't the leads necessarily, not in all movies, but some. And what's insane is what happens at the climax of this movie is they've kind of set her up to be like, she's getting better as a cop and like learning how to, fight for herself and stuff. And at basically the end of the movie, he knocks her out. Like, Sylvester Stallone knocks her out so she can't be involved in the fight. And then he beats up Simon Phoenix. At the end, she's like, you know what? You were right to knock me out. It was not safe in there. And then he just grabs her and kisses her without really her consent. And it's like, that's the end of the movie. Like, oh my God, like, this is not that long ago. You know, it's like, it is, come on, it's 20 something years ago, but it's like, wow, I don't think that would fly in a movie these days. You can't knock out the female lead and just be like, oh, this is for your own safety, honey. It's just a different time.
I will say, though, there is no greater example of Sandra Bullock's supreme charm than this movie. Like, she takes what is absolutely nonsense dialogue. And I mean, all of her lines are like mouth salad. You know, it's just nonsense words strung together because the screenwriters wanted to show that people in the future talk different, and somehow makes it both understandable and listenable and also delightful. Like, she is a delightful force in this movie. She's completely given short shrift, but like, you understand why Sandra Bullock is a star. Is because she makes what is absolutely garbage on the page into something that's kind of lovely.
I think you're right. She is great in this movie, and her. I was watching this movie. My wife had never seen it, and I was watching this movie today, and she looked up from what she was doing, and she said, "Is Sandra Bullock a robot in this movie?" Because she literally didn't know. She didn't know if Sandra, because she's talking so strangely in this movie, and
she pulls it off.
She pulls it off.
It's really
completely.
hard to do that. You know?
They kind of do the Cloud Atlas like future patois, like the true.
Yeah. I don't know why my favorite moment of her dialogue in this movie is when they're at the Taco Bell and he says, "Hey, is there any salt around?" And he's like, "Salt is bad for you, and therefore it is illegal." And I don't know why. That it just like, even though she had already made that point a bunch of times, it's like the fact that she was saying it again in that way that just got to me. Just a completely random note.
By the way, this movie name checks President Schwarzenegger, and we may end up seeing that. I don't know. It's not it's not out of the question at this point.
I mean, when this movie was made, a Governor Schwarzenegger seemed like an insane thing. So
it was played as a joke. It was truly a joke.
It was played as a thing that is so ridiculous. I mean, first of all, I think we would actually be grateful for a President Schwarzenegger at this point.
Sure.
But yeah, when it was out, it was conceived of as a ridiculous notion, and of course now we have a reality television star in the chair of the presidency. So they also actually had an explanation in the movie for how he could become president, because Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't born in the United States, so they had a 61st Amendment fictionally to explain what it was. A couple of other notes, by the way. You guys talked about Taco Bell earlier. Are you aware that there was in the European release that it was not Taco Bell? It was actually Pizza Hut that won the franchise wars.
I think the franchise wars were literally who's going to pay us enough product placement money.
Or alternately, who is okay with us using their logo in this way in this film.
No, there's no way that it wasn't product placement. There's no way. I even think that the commercials on the radio probably had some. I mean, it's a Joel Silver joint, man.
Well, according to this interview, the original draft of this was Burger King, and then Burger King and McDonald's both turned it down. They both didn't want to do it. So, but Taco Bell had the last laugh, I think.
And Taco Bell's the perfect level for this movie, right? And McDonald's is like, it's not correct. Wouldn't feel correct. It's like, yeah, Taco Bell, yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, so here's my issue with Taco Bell, though. Is the guy, Cocteau is his name, right? He says, "Hey, I'm gonna take you to Taco Bell," and everyone's like, "Oh, Taco Bell." And Sylvester Stallone's like, "Why is Taco Bell such a big deal?"
Ooh.
And then Sandra Bullock's character explains that Taco Bell won the franchise wars. So, but then my question is, would that have been their reaction because she says all restaurants are Taco Bell now. So why are they like, ooh, he's taking you to Taco Bell? Is just going to a restaurant at all like a big deal?
I think he's taking you out to a restaurant. Also, the reason that I believe it to be product placement is because he goes, oh, Taco Bell, and then he goes, although I could go for a burrito, which is the line that you put in to make sure the people that paid you a lot of money don't think you're dissing their product in the movie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I guess the franchise wars make sense, by the way, because this is a post-quarantine society. So the only restaurants that reopen are like the major franchises, right? And like to go to a restaurant will be a special thing. Who know? Like all my lovely
Yeah.
mom and pop shops here in New York are dying out left and right, and it's terribly sad. So I don't know. We're getting there.
I mean, this is essentially Bible for the future. This
Yes,
everything in
yes.
this movie will come true. It's just a matter of time.
the other thing I want to mention that I totally didn't remember and kind of blew my mind in rewatching it is this movie has fucking Nigel Hawthorne in it and Andre Gregory. Andre Gregory, who's in my favorite movie of all time, My Dinner with Andre. He's the titular Andre in My Dinner with Andre. Is reduced in this movie to being the like flash forward version of a character that is bafflingly introduced in only to show you that there's a flash forward version of him, and then unceremoniously murdered by Wesley Snipes. But I was like, that's fucking Andre Gregory, like just cashing checks, man. It was crazy.
It's that tied into that. It's also kind of inexplicable. I actually was curious because I didn't remember who directed it. I was like, oh, this is probably just like a mid 90s action movie journeyman or something. And I looked it up. This guy named Marco Brambilla only ever directed 2 movies in his life. He's a visual artist. He's an Italian visual like video installation guy. His only 2 movies, Demolition Man and the Alicia Silverstone Benicio del Toro vehicle, Excess Baggage. Then he was out. He's done with Hollywood.
He has contributed what he needs to society, and he's done.
Like I've never heard of this guy and was like, oh wow, he directed Demolition Man. But I looked it up. He was like, I think he's probably a young hotshot like video installation artist, and suddenly it's his first movie. He's directing this Stallone, Sandra Bullock, Wesley Snipes movie. I just don't even know how he was giving notes on set for can you imagine that? He's like an Italian guy.
That's where that sex scene comes from, by the way, because it is pure like I walk into a museum and it's some like weird random art installations. Like, yeah, that is the weirdest sex scene of the 90s for sure.
Also, isn't it funny how that it seems like somebody gave a note that said, hey man, if you're gonna rev the entire audience up for a sex scene, you got to give us something, which is why the very next scene is Sylvester Stallone walking in, accidentally turning on a screen, and a naked chick is on it.
That's so random.
It's by the way, another thing that was prescient. It's in portrait mode, so that prescient.
Yeah.
And it's like this naked. It just gives you boobs. It's like Joel Silver was like, we promised the kids boobs. Give them the boobs, and because we didn't get any boobs in the sex scene, so we need those boobs.
I can imagine that studio note too. It was like, you call this a sex scene? It's flashing lights.
Terrible.
There's a couple scenes that just serve no narrative purpose. Like I just want to point out, like there's a couple just straight up comedy scenes. Like one of the scenes he goes down, they're into the sewers. They're like where the Morlocks live, essentially with Dennis Leary.
Yeah, good reference.
There's a long scene where he orders a burger and it turns out to be made of rat meat. There's no narrative function to the scene. It's like a 5-minute like SNL sketch in the middle of the movie, and then they just go on to the next scene. I'm like, you could have just cut it. Like doesn't.
He'd rather have rat burger than whatever vegan Taco Bell stuff.
Yeah, come on. It goes to his character, Alan. Come on.
Red-blooded American.
You know what? It's a load-bearing character scene.
Yes, come on, dude. This is screenwriting 101, man.
You cannot edit that out.
Speaking of things they edited out, I actually don't remember. Did they mention in the movie that he had a daughter?
Yes.
Yes.
They
several
did, right?
times.
He wakes up from cryosleep. Yeah. He goes, my wife, where is she? And they explain to him that his wife died in the Great Quake of 2010. And then he pauses and thinks for a little. And he's like, my daughter, what about her? Like the first thing is the wife. He doesn't go, my wife and daughter, where are they? He goes, where's my wife? And there's a
I'm
very
incredibly horny right now. I'm out of freeze. I need something.
I only have so many words.
So there was apparently a scene that they filmed with the daughter, played by Elizabeth Ruscio.
They do seem to be setting up him meeting her.
Yeah.
He keeps asking, like in the car ride with Sandra Bullock, he keeps like, I don't even know what I would do if I saw my daughter these days. And again, in a movie where you set up one timeline and then you leap forward 30 years, for a movie that does that, it does very little to any setups and payoffs of that premise. You know?
Did you guys hear about the sequel stuff? Because that was floating around last year.
Yeah. So it was theoretically going to be like the daughter was in the sequel, right?
Uh-huh.
Is my
But Meryl Streep as the daughter
was going to be the daughter. Yeah. But
I heard that Meryl Streep herself was spreading that rumor. Like she wanted.
what was fascinating, again, this is an interview at Vulture. We'll link to it in the show notes with Alison Wilmore and the writer of the movie, is that apparently when they reference the daughter, I'll just read a quote here. It says that like this woman, Elizabeth Ruscio, ends up playing Stallone's daughter. Quote, it's a tender scene and it just stopped the movie dead. So Joel Silver's like, cut it, just cut it. And so we cut the scene out, and I tell you, all our first test screenings, everyone thought Sandra Bullock was the daughter. So when they're about to have sex, the whole audience is like, "Oh no!" End quote. Which I didn't. That never occurred to me that was a possibility.
Old boy this joint.
But
Yeah.
apparently, a lot of the audience thought they were going to watch like an earlier version of Old Boy in this movie.
I do
didn't jump
think
to
that
at all.
they had this opportunity to do all kinds of fun stuff with that. Of all these people. I mean, there's a one dude that he runs into in the police station who's like, "Hey, whoa, I can't believe it's you!" But we had no setup of that character at all.
Yeah, I was like, was that character earlier on in the movie? Did we see him at all? Was he in the? Maybe he was in the helicopter.
I think he was one of the helicopter guys.
Yeah, maybe he was one of the helicopter guys, Jeff.
Yeah. Because he was talking with people before his like big climactic scene, the first scene of the movie.
Yeah, he's pilot 1 in the script, probably.
Right.
I guess it's also, it's kind of a movie with an interesting science fiction premise, but it's made by people who have no interest in science fiction, I think, right?
true.
It's not an ideas movie. Let's just say
so
charitably, it's not an ideas movie. It's like it's really just an excuse to get Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes in weird outfits fighting. Like it's not like they're not interested in, it's not like Ryan Johnson making the movie or something, or like or a sci-fi director or someone, just being like interested in the ideas of it. It's kind of like
I do think the idea is the one that Jeff brought up, which is that there's this anxiety about this culture war and American masculinity being under threat, basically. And I think the reason why we never read any think pieces about it at the time, other than the fact that it was hard to read think pieces at the time, is that it was just so normalized. Like, of course Sylvester Stallone's the good guy. Like why wouldn't we want him to inject some feelings into things and like eat rat hamburgers and beat up people? Like why wouldn't we want that? Like people wouldn't even have thought otherwise that we would want anything else than that, right? Is kind of my thinking. But I agree with you, Alan, that there's nothing in here about like the science fiction ideas aren't particularly compelling. Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the tech in the movie. Jeff, I think you pointed out, right, that there's some things that the movie got really correct, right? Screens everywhere, that's something it got correct. Self-driving cars, we're not even there yet, but we're heading in that direction.
What are you talking about? I have one.
There you go.
Yeah, Jeff, please do not use that as the self-driving car. You're almost there, but
I mean, I don't.
It's bad if you do. It's
I
bad.
haven't been in my car in weeks, but yeah, I'll be sure to worry about that.
Yeah.
The government having the capability to track everyone's every movement, like that's not necessarily something that's too far off of reality as well. The one thing in the movie that I thought, oh man, that's so cool, we haven't gotten that yet, is the accidental foam stuff, right? Like when you get in a car crash, like foam fills up your car, and people have experimented with that kind of thing. We also saw a similar vision in like The Incredibles. Remember when like Mr. Incredible was getting bombarded by all those foam things to immobilize him? That's pretty cool. That's like, that's a pretty cool idea that we haven't thought up yet.
Re-inflatable tires. We kind of have that.
Yeah.
You have run tires that you can have a little puncture on. It's great.
Alan, any tech in the movie that you thought was particularly interesting?
I was gonna point out the foam thing because I remember that from as a kid. I was like, oh my god, this is the part where the foam, the foam comes out. It's like that. Why do we remember that stuff, man? It's like it's so weird. Like, why is that stuff in our brain? It's because when you're a kid, it's like the lyrics to every song you've heard. It's just so strange. But I definitely remember that foam, and it was kind of fun to see it again. I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Alan kind of referenced this with the end of the movie and him just sort of taking Sandra Bullock and kissing her, but earlier on, the sex scene was very much, I would like to have sex with you. Are you agreeing to this process? From Sandra Bullock's point of view, like the future is this place where we need to be very clear about giving our approval to this process. I thought that was, kind of accurate too.
Wow. Demolition Man presages COVID and Me Too? Jesus.
Indeed.
Is there anything Demolition Man can't do?
I mean, yeah. Really great.
The other scene that I absolutely love in this movie is a total like throwaway blink and you miss it moment but it made me laugh so hard in rewatching because I didn't remember that it happened. Is he sees the shot of himself on the TV screen saving the little girl from the building, and they go, you caused $400,000 of damage to someone that was ransomed for $20,000. What do you say to that? And the little girl turns to the reporter and goes, "Fuck you!" And he's like, "Good answer, girl." And I was like, that is the mentality of this movie in a nutshell. It's just.
Also, the girl was right. She was totally right. I will say the opening scene of this movie, how dumb are the cops? Like, he is thrown into cryo jail because there are other bodies there because the heat scan didn't detect it. I wonder why. I wonder why the heat scan didn't detect the bodies. Could it be the insane supervillain had dead bodies there? I don't know. No, let's just throw this guy in jail for 50 years. What?
It seems like like I just knew I was in for a good time on the rewatch because I always like when people say the title of the movie, like, and it happens almost immediately.
Yeah,
It's it. He says, "I'm tired of this Demolition Man shit." They say the title. I was like, oh man, it's not even in the middle. It's like it's right there. I love it.
the movie like peaked too early, in my opinion. Like you got to build up to that kind of thing, in my experience.
It takes a maniac to catch a maniac, you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says a tagline essentially.
Indeed. All right. Anything else we want to say about this film? I'll say another favorite line from the movie is after Sylvester Stallone's character delivers a one-line. There's some couple good one-liners. We were talking about how when we reviewed another '90s film, Judgment Night, the one-liners were pretty rough in that movie, right? I think Emilio Estevez says something like, "You're on your own, pal." Like that's his one-liner in that movie. And in this one, Spartan says, "You're going to regret this for the rest of your life, both seconds of it," which is just
that's not bad.
I miss the '90s one-liners, guys. And then
It's so clunky.
I don't know, man. And then Huxley says, "You are even better live than on Laserdisc." And the joy way you pause to make a glib witticism before doing battle with that strangely weaponed scrap. It was so ...
Yeah, that's the kind of dialogue that Sandra Bullock had to deliver and not sound like mouth poop, and she does it somehow.
Charming.
Yeah,
she's very charming.
She's great.
There's actually a pretty bad Stallone line. I actually wrote this down. It's like he's fighting Simon Phoenix, Wesley Snipes' character, and then he punches him or something. He says, "You forgot to say Simon says." It's like, all right,
yeah.
just cut that one out of there. Like, just don't have it in the edit. Like, just don't. You don't have to use it.
You can fix it in the edit. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the thing. I know they're terrible, but we don't really get them anymore, right? Like we don't.
Yeah.
Maybe John Wick had a couple of them, but like I don't know. Like there's very few of those lines anymore in movies, and I kind of appreciate how cheesy and terrible they were.
Sure. That's why we have the Fast and Furious movies. Like it's what it exists for. Yeah.
And that's why people love them. That's the only reason. Those one-liners.
Yes.
Alrighty. Well, anything else we want to say about this movie? Any other aspects to bring up? Overall, had a great experience watching it again. And I do think it's a movie that wasn't appreciated as much in its time as it should have been. I think it has stood the test of time. And
Are you serious?
I'm being completely genuine.
Well, as it should have been. Yeah.
No, I mean, because it was like it got like I mean, who knows how accurate Rotten Tomatoes is going back that long, but it's like it has like a 60-something% Rotten Tomatoes. Like, it was not well regarded. It didn't do very well at the box office, and
that
now
sounds about right. That sounds about right.
But now people love that.
It's terrible.
People love this movie.
Not a good movie, Dave.
Are you guys kidding me? I'm being
It's
completely
terrible.
earnest. All right, well, I'm sorry we disagree about this.
You
Alan,
spent this whole hour, Dave, thinking we love this movie. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Honestly, I would say you're both right. It's a fun rewatch, and it's maybe not that good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there we go. All right, that's going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of the podcast. You can find more episodes of this show at /filmcast.com. Email us at /filmcast@gmail.com. Our spoiler bumper comes from filmmaker Kyle Hillinger, who has a new video essay out about Passengers. Check it out at /film.com. And our theme song comes from AdamWarrock.com. This episode was edited by Beatty Zhang. Stay tuned to hear what we'll be discussing next week. In the meantime, Alan Yang, where can people find your work on the internet this week?
Right now, you can watch a movie I wrote and directed called Tigertail. It's on Netflix. So if you search for Tiger, just keep searching and then write tail in. Don't search King. Just write in Tigertail, and you'll find the movie I made. So
Now, I got to ask you, actually, did you know at the time that you're making this movie that it was going to be released shortly after a movie called Tiger King, and were you worried about that?
So I had no inkling because this movie, there's a spoilerific reason why the movie's called that. Then I finished making the movie. We put it together and we were talking about the release date. And then very late in the process, they were like, just so you know, your movie comes out in April. There's a documentary or something that comes out in March. And we had, look, a couple months before Tiger King, no one knew what that was, or no one knew.
Documentary? Who's
yeah,
gonna watch
exactly.
a documentary?
Yeah, and I was like, well, I have no idea what this is. And Netflix like doesn't promote things that highly until a couple weeks before they come out, and you don't know if it's a hit. You don't know like that Tiger King's a hit or Making a Murder's a hit basically till it comes out, and then it sweeps the world. And it just made me laugh. It was a funny thing to talk about at interviews and stuff. I don't think there's any confusion, but we'll draft their heat like a remora under a shark, and people searching Tiger and their fingers slipping. Sure, why not?
You know how there's like there's a whole like industry of movies that make their box art to look like other movies, right? And it's like they're hoping you're looking for 1917, and they'll design their like font and like the graphics on the thing to look kind of like 1917, but it's not. It's a completely different movie that's about a similar topic. That's kind of what Tigertail is right now, is what I'm trying to say.
100%. I'm just actively spreading the rumor that Joe Exotic is in the movie. You just have to look for him. So
95% of viewers of Tigertail are failed Tiger King viewers, I think is really.
Yeah, and the weird thing is they're loving it. They're like, wow, this has like Wong Kar-wai references. Like, no.
All right, Devindra Hardawar, if I'm over your work on the internet.
Oh, you can find me on Twitter at Devindra, and I write about tech at Engadget.com, and check me out on the Engadget podcast.
How about you, Jeff Kanata?
Well, you can listen to me talk about video games on a show called DLC, which you can find at 5by5.tv/DLC. I do a comedy science show called We Have Concerns that you can find at wehaveconcerns.com. And I do a live play Dungeons & Dragons show. It's all about epic storytelling. You can find that on YouTube by searching for The Dungeon Run, or as an audio podcast by searching for The Dungeon Run, or by watching us live Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific time at caffeine.tv/The Dungeon Run.
And if you want to hear me talk with Alan Yang about his new movie Tigertail, check out Culturally Relevant at culturallyrelevantshow.com or wherever your podcasts can be downloaded. Next week, we didn't actually time this out like this. We didn't know we were going to review 2 dumb action movies in a row. But the current plan, which may change, is going to be Extraction, the Netflix action film with Chris Hemsworth, produced by the Russo brothers, I believe.
Sure.
So that's coming out on Netflix, and you should check it out because we're going to be.
The trailer looks pretty good.
Yeah,
I'll say that. I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see if this is going to be more like Six Underground or more like Triple Frontier. I guess there's really little difference between those 2 movies. But anyway,
How dare you?
Extraction going to be the review next week. It's going to be on Netflix. Check it out. And thanks for listening to the Slash Filmcast. Stay tuned for an After Dark where stay tuned for an After Dark where we will be discussing devs. In the meantime, see you later. Alrighty, we're still broadcasting live, but Alan, that was a lot of fun, man. Thanks for joining us.
That was great, man.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave,
really appreciate
Dave, are we
Thanks,
stopping
guys.
our recording or are we continuing our recording?
Let's just keep rolling. Keep rolling.
Okay,
Keep
okay.
rolling. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alan. That was amazing.
Yeah, really appreciate the pivot. I thought it was a lot of fun. You guys are hilarious and big fan and happy to be on. Really fun.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Keep it up. Keep up the good work, Alan. And
All
yeah,
right.
and congrats on the launch of the film, dude. We haven't talked.
Yeah.
I think the last time I talked to you, it was before the movie came out. So we haven't talked since, but congrats, dude.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've been really happy with the reception, and thank you for having me on your pods. It's really fun.
All right, dude. Yeah, and use like WeTransfer.com or whatever, G Drive, whatever, to send me the audio. I'm at davechen@davechen.net. Cool?
All right, will do.
All right, thanks, Alan. See
Thank you,
later.
guys.
Have a good
Bye.
day.
Well, that was fun.
That was
good.
great.
Yeah.
That was great.
That was awesome.
I'm so glad we did that.
Yes. Thanks for putting in the work to do that, guys. I know that was a swing for you guys. So, okay, here we go. Here we go.
I may have lost a second or two of audio somewhere along the line. I noted a hiccup, so Beatty just needs to seek a bit with mine. We'll see.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
I
we'll see.
have
It
a
shouldn't be
backup.
that tough. Yeah.
I have a backup. So
Okay.
yeah, but make sure you make a note when you send it to her.
Yep.
Okay, ready?
Mhm.
Welcome to the Slash Filmcast After Dark. This is a time of the show where we talk about a variety of different topics that we didn't get to during the regular show. One thing we want to do before we get to our discussion topic today, which is devs, is we want to thank all the people who've donated to the podcast recently. A big thanks to Mesfin Mibrate, Byron Chu, Mary P. from North Bergen, New Jersey, and Joseph S., who writes in, you all always manage to brighten up my week, which we all need right now. Also, fun fact, 21 Bridges probably doesn't show too many bridges because it was filmed in my hometown of Philadelphia, not New York. Thanks for solving that mystery, Joseph. I don't know if you guys remember, we talked about 21 Bridges a few weeks ago on the podcast.
We did a very in-depth analysis of the plot and structure of 21 Bridges.
Yeah.
You
that
counted
was-
every bridge and like named them individually and told us like when they were built. It was amazing.
It was
The most
okay.
useful dissection of the structure, plotting,
Mhm.
script writing process of 21 Bridges that anyone could expect or want.
Indeed. So thank you very much for that donation, Joseph. And also Bobby from Flowood, Mississippi wrote in with a very generous donation as well. He writes, I have listened to every one of your shows. You guys feel like buds I have known for years. I love hanging out with you guys, especially the After Dark episodes. I listen to many podcasts every day as I operate heavy equipment. And yours
Whoa.
is both very informative and extremely enjoyable. The best out there. Thanks for making my days go better. That one comes from Bobby writing from Mississippi. Bobby...
Clearly hasn't read our warning label. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. I would not recommend you listen to the Slash Filmcast while you operate heavy machinery. Just doesn't seem like a good idea.
I thought that was a given. I thought people understood that.
I mean, we all can't even operate our computers correctly sometimes while recording the podcast. So
I can't
amazed.
operate light equipment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you can't operate light equipment. You can't operate audio equipment, Jeff, as we learned a few weeks ago.
That has been very, very well documented. Yes.
But thank you so much for your donations. If you want to support this podcast, go to paypal.me/filmcast. That's paypal.me/the-word-filmcast. Never donate to this show if it in any way causes you hardship. But if you do want to throw some cash our way, that'd be great. And also, if you want to support our show for $0, just go to the Apple Podcast listing, take 5 seconds, leave us a star rating. It really does help, and it's a way to support the show without needing to pay any money whatsoever. So thanks to all the people who donated this week. It's very much appreciated. Okay. Let's get to our After Dark topic today, which is Devs. Devs concluded its 8-episode limited run on Hulu recently. And I will read a plot summary of Devs, and I think we just are going to have to say we're going to spoil the show, right? Like, we
Yeah,
can't-
and I think it's pretty. If you're at all interested in devs, watch it. Don't listen to this first.
Don't listen to this. Why are you listening to this? Why are you
I mean, most
listening
people-
to this?
Yeah.
Most people have already turned the show
Accept the mystery. Go listen. Yeah.
Yeah, most people have shut this off like 5 minutes into our Demolition Man conversation, so...
off. Yeah, or didn't even download this one because they're like, Demolition Man?
Devs is an FX Limited series that focuses on a young software engineer named Lily Chan, who works for Amaya, a cutting-edge technology company based in Silicon Valley. After her boyfriend Sergey's apparent suicide, Lily suspects foul play and begins to investigate. She quickly realizes that all roads lead to Forrest, Amaya's enigmatic CEO, and Devs, the company's secret development division. In Lily's quest to discover the truth, she uncovers a technology-based conspiracy that could change the world. That's a summary from the internet. So we've watched all three of us have watched all 8 episodes of Devs.
Uh-huh.
It is a very thought-provoking show, in my opinion. Lots to think about, lots to talk about. We got a lot of requests from people, like, please talk about Devs. And I wanted to talk with Devs about you guys, like, independently of getting the requests. So I'm glad we're doing this right now. So let's just, quickly, let's do the overall thoughts. And then, we got to start diving into detail, specifically the finale, because there's just so much to rip into there. But overall thoughts on the series, Devendra Hardware?
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I love Alex Garland's science fiction. I think that's where I am. Like when he is directing and writing his own thing, as he has been since Ex Machina, and he also did Annihilation, which I genuinely, love. He makes movies that are really for him exploring big ideas. In a way that feels very unique to him. And I'm just really digging it. Like this is a series that's very slow and methodical, but it's always engaging with like these high level ideas and things I've often wondered about. I actually had a very nice chat with him for Engadget. We recorded like a half an hour interview, so go check that out on the Engadget podcast. But he is a guy, like when I sit down and talk with him, I also talked with him before Ex Machina. I swear I could sit there and just talk with him for hours because he is a guy who's like, he is like the sci-fi version of the most interesting man in the world, because he always has these ideas floating around. He's always trying to do new things with them. So yeah, I found this fascinating. I'm somebody, I studied philosophy. I'm very interested in AI and where our tech world is going to leave us. I write about tech and I barely like have a decent understanding of what quantum computing means, but him tying it to ideas like determinism and free will, I just found endlessly fascinating. And while it's also doing all this, it's also like a great espionage thriller. It's also a great murder mystery. It is so many things all at once. I absolutely love it. I love all the performances. Like this is Emmy level work from Nick Offerman, who is somebody, he is a billionaire CEO who is dealing with the most crushing loss imaginable, and he sells it. He sells it so much. And as somebody with a kid, I feel that. Like I feel his emotion and like how dead he is inside, during the show. So there's so much going on here. This show turns Zach Grenier, a guy I've seen in a whole bunch of shows. He's on The Good Wife and The Good Fight as a very like an asshole, paper pushing lawyer, but he's just an asshole. This show turns him into a heavy. Like this show turns this guy into like the security guard who is out there like kicking ass and executing Russian spies. Like it's insane. Like I'm just amazed at every cool thing the show does. So
Yeah.
I am totally on board, even if it doesn't fully come together at the end. I know a lot of people had issues with the ending, but I loved it.
Edward Norton's emasculated boss in Fight Club is who
Yes.
Zach Grenier
Yes.
is. Yeah, and yeah, he's a heavy in this movie. Does a really good job of it. Jeff Kanata, overall thoughts on Devs?
Yeah, I think it is one of the great science fiction series of all time. And I said that thinking it would be a big deal. And then I kind of started Googling around. It doesn't have much competition, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because most science fiction on television is an adventure tale, right? We got Star Trek and we've got Battlestar Galactica and we've got all these science fiction ideas. While many of them have great, even Doctor Who and all that stuff can have great sci-fi ideas in them. They're almost always in the form of an adventure tale.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that speaks to the form of television as a serialized medium, or as an ongoing medium. But one of the things I love most about this is that it is a limited series, and so it has the ability to really have a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, no sequels likely coming. This is a single story.
No need to set up something else. We're telling a tale, and I love that about it. And it also, I think, speaks to the golden age of television that we're in, where this kind of thing can exist on TV now. Which this would be a film in another era, and the fact that it has the room to breathe as an 8-hour miniseries is so great and so appreciated. But it is truly a great sci-fi show. I am in the camp that it doesn't stick the landing, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in its place, and we will get to all of that and pick it apart. But so much of what this show does, it does extremely well, and it weaves a tale. It tells a yarn, and I love that aspect of it. It's also a show about photography. It is just exquisitely photographed, and the imagery in it is indelible. The look and feel of the technology, the look and feel of the forbidden place is quite striking, and it lingers. It takes its time. It has 8 hours to really wallow, or it's a negative connotation, but really enjoy the feeling, the look of things. And there are some shots throughout this would turn to my wife and go, "Oh, that's a poster. That is."
Yeah.
I mean, there are shots of San Francisco. There are shots of, even visual effects shots in the show that are just
Mhm.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
The
way-
image of the Amaya office campus, which has like a 100-foot tall statue of Forrest's daughter, is so weird and random, but also like haunting. And
Yeah.
it's so many things
But
all
also,
at once. Yeah.
I don't even know if that was a real thing. My wife was convinced that never was real.
Oh yeah, it probably wasn't real, but it is still like the imagery of like their like little meeting area outside is like at her feet, like they're just like
I think
here beneath the gods or something. It's amazing.
I think that was a failure of CG, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think it's supposed to be ambiguous that it's an actual physical statue.
Yeah.
You're supposed to look at it and think, oh, he built a massive statue of his daughter. But it looked almost like a hologram. Like, CG just didn't quite sell it for me. It looked almost like a hologram. I was like, is that really there? So I agree with you that it didn't really fully work in the way it was supposed to, in my opinion. But I'll share my thoughts briefly about this, and then we can dive into the final episode. I mean, I think that overall, I really appreciated this show. It makes some decisions that I think are pretty baffling, and I do think it's an acquired taste. It's not something I would recommend for everyone because every episode starts with often minutes of just abstract imagery that frequently is never explained.
Love it. My
Yeah,
jam.
and your patience level with that is going to dictate whether this is a show you're going to enjoy or not. And so I've seen some people say that this is a show that should have been a movie, and I'm kind of curious, like, what would it have been like if it was a movie? I actually think that it might have been better as a movie. I don't know that there was 8 episodes worth of story to tell. Instead, there's just a lot of I don't think there is 8 episodes worth of story,
There's
but
mood.
there's a lot of mood and atmosphere, which is itself valuable. And if that's something that you enjoy, then certainly you'll appreciate this as well. But
that is the David Lynch vibe. Like, I love how he's taking that sort of like aesthetic and approaching it with science fiction. There's not 2 seasons worth of story in Twin Peaks, but
that's fair.
The experience and like what you're going through still makes the journey worth it for me.
It's good great comparison to Indra. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Also, I mean, we're in full spoiler territory, right?
Yeah, we're in full spoiler territory.
Okay, so the idea that this is a story about people, for the most part, not our leads, but it involves very big characters who know everything that's going to happen.
Yep.
That is a mood.
Mhm.
And I love how this movie indulges itself in letting that land on them. They are like the performances that, like you said, Nick Offerman is extraordinary. And Alison Pill.
So good.
Both of them, once you get to realizing that they live lives where there is no mystery, they are I love how it examines that feeling that one must get to when there is no more surprise, when there is no more wondering what the next moment will bring. They are devoid of humanity. They are empty shells, empty vessels walking through a prescripted moment to moment. This idea that knowing the future is a curse, it steals away any joy that they have. And their performances are extraordinary to deliver that. And I bring that up now as a way to say that I think fundamentally that mood that the show lingers in so frequently is this like settling of sort of rectifying the time and space as a function. You're sitting there looking at just uber close-ups of plants, or a shot of the mountainside with some mist on it, and it's like all of that I think builds to this crescendo that the show is going for. And I understand the idea that it feels like fluff, but to me, all of that felt like momentum, especially knowing where we arrive.
I wouldn't describe it as fluff, but that's a very fair point. My issue with the performances I agree with you that there's something very interesting about the idea of somebody who knows the future and then that affecting their overall demeanor and affect, right? Like that just transforms who you are as a person. But what didn't work about the show for me is that everyone acts like that, and even people who don't know the future. And so I don't know why like Lily has the same speaking style as
Well,
Forrest.
she like her character is somebody who's described as always being a bit removed from other people. Like that's her whole deal with her ex-boyfriend, who she treats like garbage, basically. But he's still enthralled with her and everything. But she's not like a fully she's not a human engaging with the world and the people around her. And I found that there
but
are
I feel like
similarities
I guess
there.
I just feel like everyone is like Kenton is like that, and even Jamie sometimes is like. It's just like everyone has this kind of. It's like very like Kubrickian way of speaking where everyone's pausing and and it's just
I
like.
think you're right, Dave.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It is a very self-serious and a self-indulgent manner of delivery from everybody, and it does seem to be directed that way.
Yeah.
And I think it's on the verge of being too much, but for me, it mostly worked.
And I was able to look past it, but I think like anyone, if anyone popped in and watched like one scene from the middle of this thing, they might say that it is stilted to the point of parody, and I think that'd be a reasonable reaction. The only other thing that I really had a problem with before, and I'll just say like I'm one of the people that loved the ending of this show, so like I'm kind of saying some of the things I had gripes with before I dive into like what I love about the ending is. The other thing is, I just found the storytelling in the first 2 episodes to be completely baffling. Like, why would he tell the story this way, where you see the death happen of the boyfriend, and then you're in Lily's perspective, and then you're learning you're waiting like basically 2 episodes for her to catch up to your level of knowledge, and that just didn't. It's like telling the Matrix from the perspective of Trinity as opposed to Neo. Like that just doesn't make any sense to me. I if I was being charitable, I would say there's the show's trying to make a meta point about what it's like when you know everything, but then it doesn't do that the whole time. It doesn't do that in later episodes, obviously.
No, I kind of love that the show, like in the first episode, you see these people are murderers. Life doesn't matter to them. Like the only thing that matters is this work, and whatever mysterious work this is more important than, one random Russian guy's life. So I like that wasn't a mystery, because I feel like in any normal show it'd be like she is the girlfriend, she's trying to discover the murderer, and it's like a big thing like that. No, like we know the solution. We're just watching her try to figure it out, and I think that process is interesting. Yeah.
Well, I would totally agree with Dave in that I could see. He goes to Devs. We have this incredible sequence where he's brought into Devs. It's this amazing, visually arresting thing where he's, he through this maglev thing, he goes in, he looks at the thing, and that amazing moment where Nick Offerman says, "Look at the code, you'll figure it out.
Yeah,
you'll understand what it is." And then if after that we see him walk to the center of the thing, pour gasoline on himself, and set himself on fire. We're like, what the fuck did he see?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and then you have her try to figure out what, and we think the mystery is, what did he see? And then we have the boyfriend go, "Oh my God, look at this loop." And you go, "Holy shit, it's all fake?" Like that would be.
But that's what I'm saying. I think
journey.
a traditional show would do that.
Yeah,
is the thing. Like,
but I think there's a reason that's most traditional shows do that, because I think that's a better way of doing it.
I hear you, but I'm just saying it's a different way of telling the same story. I appreciate the ballsiness of just like fuck it.
Yeah.
Like here, this is it. This is what happened. I'm giving you the whole story. Now let's watch this character try to figure it out, step by step. I realize it's not as rewarding, right? You don't get like the great
when
like,
you recognize
thrill.
that the flames repeat, that's like a holy shit moment. Oh, except we already knew that they faked it. So
exactly.
Yeah.
But the way I like, for me, that process, it was like the way they faked it, the way like he figures it out, and also like, man, these people have like a reality deducing quantum computer, and they can't like create unique flame models. What the hell is going on over there?
They don't have the budget of Demolition Man.
Yeah, we just got this from Shutterstock, and we didn't go for premium.
All right, let's talk about episode 8.
Wait. Before we do, I want one more thing to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because my favorite moment in this show is in episode, I want to say 6. It is one of my favorite scenes in anything I've seen this year and in quite a long time. And it is the kind of scene that I always love. I always devour. And that is the extended sequence when the two women are sitting at the kitchen table and she's like, ask me about devs.
Yep.
Yep.
That, the way that information is teased out and intercut with the two guys outside just sort of shooting the shit and passing time and playing frisbee with each other. But how, dude, my fucking favorite thing in all, I think it's like my favorite thing. It really is, especially in sci-fi.
You like two people sitting at a table talking to each other, Jeff. I think we've established this.
Yes,
for you.
but
Yeah.
also, but it's how they talk. It is the I'm on the edge of my seat finding out the next bit of information, and it is this very methodical, systematic explanation of how the rules of this world work. And it is this back and forth, this tete-a-tete, who's smarter, who's playing the chess game, and where are we going? What does it reveal about everything we've seen up to this point? And done in this very calm, very methodical manner. Oh my God, I eat that shit up. And it is done so well in the show. Like that unfortunately for me was the climax of this show, and it never achieved those heights again. But that sequence, that like, okay, here's what it's really about, and ending a moment on, unfortunately, this is where it gets very difficult for you, and then we cut to the boys again. It's like, oh, I'm just like, I want to know more, and it's drama, dude. It's high drama, just in the most calm, deliberate circumstances. I just fucking loved it.
One of the moment that struck me prior to the last episode was, I think it was in episode 7 when Kenton breaks in, shoots her boyfriend, and then is about to strangle her to death when like the homeless guy comes in and reveals that he's a Russian agent.
So good. And how that reveal happens where he just starts speaking Russian. I was
really, really cool. And then, but there's this quote he says that just really stopped me in my tracks, where he says, quote, the most important thing is that you understand that the life you had, I'm sorry, let me do this again. There's this quote he says, and I'll just read it here. He says, the most important thing is you understand the life you once had is gone. The choice you have is about the life you have next, end quote. And that just really stopped me in my tracks, because we are all right now going through a life-changing, world-altering event right now with the coronavirus pandemic. And this, in this, obviously it's a very different nature thing that Lily's going through in the show, but she's just gone through something that is going to change the rest of her life no matter what. And it's about like, hey, you have basically a few minutes to accept that everything that you once knew about life is over, and that but you have a choice as to what comes next.
That is self-help via Alex Garland, by the way, like a very direct statement with no emotion attached to it. It's like, dude, you gotta do this thing.
Yep.
Otherwise, that's it. That's
and it's, in its way, it's a choice that's presented to everyone right now, right?
Yes.
It's like, you're the life you once had is gone. The choice you have is the life you have next. And anyway, that just really struck me. So
it was a great moment. I remember turning to my wife and going, right before that, it's so funny. Right before that, I turned to my wife and I go, it's so weird we spent so much time with this homeless guy character. It's like, that seems weird,
Yeah.
It seems like wasted moves. I don't understand
set
why.
up for something. Yeah.
It was great.
Also, want to throw a shout out to just the music and the sound design of the show.
The
because,
soundtrack is great too. Yeah, listen
Ben
to it on
Salisbury,
Spotify.
Jeff Barrow, The Insects, like
the song selection, so good.
Yeah,
so
really
good
great.
all around.
Really
yeah,
great,
just like, I love the aesthetic. I love Garland's aesthetic. I love. He apparently had a very hard time making Annihilation, and I can understand why. If you remember the like crazy distribution deal that happened with that, like the studio lost faith in it. It went Netflix outside of America and did very poorly in theaters, and like Garland was super frustrated. So I can understand like why he wanted to tell this story this way via Hulu. And yeah, it could probably be a little shorter and be a little more focused, but man, I love that we live in like, this is peak TV. I love that somebody of his like style and intellect and just like grand ambition can create 8 episodes of an amazing story of something that like nobody has really told before too. Like, it's so unique. It is so, we've seen so many different future explorations, but nobody being like this, quantum computing could be something huge. And here's one, potential way. We don't think this is in reality. We have no fucking clue what quantum computing is going to do, because the way computers work right now, it's all like ones and zeros, right? It's all very binary. Quantum computing works in a way that kind of in a way that quantum physics does. We have no clue. We think it's going to help with encryption. We think it's going to help with a lot of things, but we are dealing with a level of technology that is basically magic. And I love that he took that and just ran with it. It was like, okay, what if we could, it's sort of like simulation theory. What if you could figure out the simulation, then you could figure out that, yeah, we're living in a machine, or we're all living on a predetermined path or something. I love it. I love the idea, just running with it. But yeah, let's go to the ending.
I will say that I've done some reading about this topic after I watched the show, and that I agree with you. The ideas that I think are most interesting because they are so close to reality are the ideas like, are we living in a simulation? What is free will? What is determinism? Is there such thing as a multiverse? Those are all actually like really interesting questions that people are really exploring in our reality right now. But the idea of devs or deus as depicted in the show is
by the way, a great freaking reveal.
Such
just
a cool
like,
reveal.
Yeah.
I mean,
like cherry.
yeah. I mean,
Fucking cool, dude. Come on, that was fucking cool.
It's glorious.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool in the sense of like all that other moody atmospheric stuff is cool, which is I can understand thinking it's cool, but I can also understand thinking this show is way up its own ass. But
I mean, yeah, I'm
fair
here
enough.
for it. I'm totally fine with it. Yeah.
But I did think Devs was a really weird, vague name, so I'm glad that they explained something about it. But apparently, what quantum computing is depicted doing is essentially impossible because for a very basic reason, which is that the data set you need is so massive that no such thing is even possible right now. I mean,
I would like to point out that this is basically a modern version of one of my favorite book series of all time, which is The Foundation by Isaac Asimov, who was talking about this shit in the early 60s, which is basically saying, hey, if we had enough data with big enough numbers, we can predict the future.
Right.
So I loved it, and I love that it is firmly anchored in.
What is the name of the technology? Was it
psychohistory?
Psychohistory. Yeah.
But like
it is just that.
The amount of data you'd need is so massive, and we don't have the ability to even think about how to store that yet, and we don't even have the ability to predict weather 3 weeks from now. Right now,
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it's like the idea that we could build this whole thing is.
I don't know how many weathermen are using quantum computing, though, Dave.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. Okay, anyway, episode 8. I'm just gonna read the plot summary because I think we should just establish what happened. So this is from Wikipedia. Inside the devs' labs, Forrest shows Lily a projection of what she's about to do. Holding Kenton's gun on Forrest, she leads him into the transportation capsule, leading out of Devs, and shoots him, causing the capsule to crash and killing Lily in the fall. Beyond this point, Devs can see nothing. Forrest tells Lily their actions have been predetermined and that the system's real name is Deus. Lily leads Forrest into the capsule as projected, but as the doors close, she throws the gun away, shocking Forrest. Amazing moment, by the way. Before they can reach the entrance, Stewart overrides the electromagnetic field that suspends the capsule and causes it to crash. Forrest and Lily die. Before he walks away, Stewart tells a devastated Katie that the system had to be stopped. Lily regains consciousness on the day before Sergei joins Devs and finds an empty field where the Devs building once stood, and Forrest playing with his wife and daughter there. He tells her that Katie reconstructed them from the moment of their deaths and that they now exist in a simulation inside the Devs machine where the two of them are the only ones who remember what happened. In the real world, an emotional Katie reveals the Devs system to Senator Lane and asks her to help her keep it turned on. Inside Devs, Lily finds Jamie and hugs him, which he returns. So that's what happens in the finale. Jeff Kanata, you thought this show did not stick the landing. Tell me why.
My fundamental issue with the end is that I don't think it pays off why Lily is special. What allows her to toss the gun when no one else could? Why would not anyone else, Nick Offerman's character or Alison Pill, why wouldn't they have attempted to do something different at any point? Were they unable to do something different? I know he has a speech at one point where he says, like, I know what's going to happen, but it's not like I'm not like I'm saying pre-scripted lines. I'm actually acting on the impulse I want to do. But wouldn't you, knowing what you had to do, attempt
I
wasn't.
think so. So they did bring up a scene earlier on, like when the greater team figures out like what is happening in that weird like theater room. They do like try to break it, and I think the idea is that even when you are acting, trying to break the simulation, that is still like part of the simulation. Like the very act of you knowing it is something the simulation predicted or
I
something.
get
So
that, but
I hear you. It's still not clear.
I wasn't sufficiently convinced that Lily
Yeah, yeah.
had something special about her. We were just told she's special. It's not. There's not. It would be great. I mean, this is a pat thing, but it would be great if like her love caused it to. There's some thing that is inevitably human caused her to be able to shatter. There's just nothing. It's just because they said that after this point we don't see anything, and then she does that, but there's no. I mean, I liked the explanation that it is basically her eating the forbidden fruit.
Yep.
She had the gall to not follow instructions, but I didn't feel like the show, which had, I thought, set up things so very clearly and so very well for most of it. I thought it kind of just punted on the idea of a reason why she is this special, unique case that is able to do that.
I hear you.
Yeah, I think that's a fair.
It's not. The show doesn't fully support it. I think the idea that she made a choice in a way that nobody else really has before, because I think what's different about her and like Alison Pill's character is that Alison Pill accepts that she saw how devs works. She saw some of the predictions, and she just accepted as like, oh, we did it. We can predict the future now. Therefore, everything I see is the only thing that will ever happen. And maybe there is something to the idea of somebody who doesn't fully buy into that, into the mystique of that, to still believe that there are other choices. Yeah.
I also, stepping through the logic of that of that sequence of events, I feel like her breaking the determinism, throwing the gun, actually changed nothing. Because
for her, yeah.
Well, for anybody, right? Because either she kills what's his bucket, Nick Offer, Forrest. Either she kills Forrest, or the fall kills Forrest, or either way, he's being reborn. The whole plan was for him to be reborn into the machine, right? So effectively, her big moment of transgression has no real effect on anything.
I actually think that's a feature, not a bug, Jeff. I actually think that that's one of the ideas that Alex Garland's trying to communicate with that scene, is that, yes, you can make decisions around the edges, but that sometimes ultimately the future is still going to pull you in a specific direction, right? And that regardless of like a tiny change you make, it's still going to be this outcome. I think it's a nod to that idea.
I mean, I think that's a valid reading. I had a different interpretation. I felt like the push and pull was between a deterministic world or a multiverse world, which is why we have that entire other character, the young character, whose name I don't remember all the names. The young character who was fired and then falls off the bridge to prove that there is determinism, and we see that imagery, that very effective. Lyndon, yes, that very effective imagery throughout of all the different possible ways this scene could play out when we see multiple versions of characters, taking slight deviations on their walking path or whatever it is, to sort of illustrate how there could potentially be this multiverse of infinite trajectory changes. And I thought that the fundamental argument was, is there a range of decisions at the point of each you break off into a new reality infinitely, or is there one future that is we step toward without any deviation? And I think the characters, Alison Pill and Nick Offerman's characters, believe wholeheartedly that there is one future.
Yep.
And in fact, that's why he fires Lyndon. He says, you tried to show me that there's this infinite range when all I want is the one single future. And I thought in that moment we would realize, oh, she can, even if things work out the same, she can show that there are variations
Right.
along that path.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it meant nothing. Ultimately, it didn't have that ramification. It did. They didn't. There was no. It didn't seem like that argument was pursued. It didn't. The show didn't seem to care about that anymore, even though it had spent a lot of time putting those juxtaposed with one another.
I think it's juggling those ideas. Like, here's
Yeah,
the thing. Like, I
I
don't
agree,
think
yeah.
Garland is like forming conclusions. That's the thing. Like, he is great at asking questions and making you ponder these ideas. And even he can't really say definitively like what is what, like what is a potentially better view of the world. I think one way to look at it is that like the past for these people, the past for this world is maybe that is immutable. That's the way it was. And what Forrest got mad at was them using the multiverse theory to like recreate the view of Jesus on the cross, right? Because at that point, if he was doing that to recreate his daughter, it would not be his daughter anymore. It would be a multiverse version of his daughter, and then we're getting to like Rick and Morty territory. But yeah,
Well,
I
think
don't know.
I think
The
it's
show
simpler
says
than that.
anything beyond
I
future.
think that first of all, I think you're right, Jeff, that a lot of the show argues for the existence of
Yeah.
multiverse. Visually,
Mhm.
it argues that, right? There's that really amazing episode where you see the different versions of people walking out. You see Alison Pill walking out of her lecture hall in 5 different ways, and also Lyndon. But then you see Lyndon falling like 100 times, right?
Yeah.
So I think what it's saying
And there's
is
no version of Lyndon not falling.
correct. So I think what it's saying is that like some things are definitely going to happen no matter what, and then some things like there might be differences in, right? That's my interpretation of it.
Yeah,
So
it does seem like they actually do live in a deterministic universe. I don't think he's saying about the real world, but the fact that they were able to build a machine that can still do this stuff enough to like recreate the past and see the future, like it's sort of implying that, and that leads into like, oh, if they're just living in a simulation, if Forrest and Lily are in a simulation, is that any different than the world they left?
To be fair, I disagree with your assertion that they're in a deterministic world because I do think that visually the show's trying to tell us they're not. But we can agree to disagree on that. Let's talk about
what you just described is the idea that some things can be changed and some things can't.
Yeah,
And I
correct.
think, like, that idea
Ultimately,
that some
why
things
would the
can't is deterministic.
why would the computer not be able to simulate past that certain point if her changing things or making that decision didn't actually change anything that it would simulate? Like that's the disconnect that I get is like she makes a move there that maybe the computer didn't see, but ultimately it loops back around to the same thing that would have happened regardless, right? Why does it break the simulation? I just don't feel like the show gives me a big enough case as to why that's the end of the rules of the universe, as Alison Pill says.
Right. I agree that you're expecting this massive buildup and it doesn't quite deliver on that. My interpretation of the end is that they stick them both in the simulation, right? And that essentially that is what devs becomes used for at that point, right? They're no longer using it to make predictions or do anything like that. What is fascinating to me about the ending of this show is the whole show for 8 episodes, they're throwing at you these ideas of determinism and fate and do we actually have free will? And it's like we've built a machine that can predict into the past and the future. And then in the last 15 minutes of the show, it just hits you with a sidewinder that like, by the way, this prediction model we have is so detailed that it is indistinguishable from reality, basically, right? That if you were a person in this model that we're created, it would basically be like you're living. It would be you would not be able to tell the difference between yourself in this model and you in real life. And first of all, that's completely fascinating. And then secondly, then what the show does with it, with Lily's character, finding Jamie at the end, after she's already kind of confessed, not necessarily confessed her love for him, but at least like acknowledge that he should be in her life. I just found deeply moving. The idea that you could go back in time, to a time before like all this crazy, terrible thing happened to you, and finally share with people how you actually feel about them and stuff. Like, just a very deep, profound, moving thought.
I just felt like the much more mind blowing moment for me was when the other character points out that because everything is in the box is in the box. And there's a box in that box in the box, and
Never
infinitely
turn off the power. Never turn off the
infinitely
power.
so,
Yeah.
right? Infinitely so. So, of course there would be. I mean, I didn't feel like that was a wallop or a sidewinder moment as you described it at the end, because of course, if everything is in the box and the box is in the box, there's no difference between what we experience in reality and what is experienced 4, 8, a million levels deep in the box, right? It is
Right.
fundamentally the same all the way down infinitely.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Definitely.
I
To what you were saying, Dave, by the way, for me, I don't think if they're trying to build up a love story between Lily and Jamie, I don't think they really settled on that, because Jamie just seems like the poor guy who is really, really into this girl who just never really gave him the time of the day. And the ending is like, okay, maybe she's giving him a shot now. Not quite a true love story. But it's more like, hey,
she gave that
give
whole
this another
monologue. She
go.
gave that whole monologue welcoming him into her bed and stuff.
Yep.
So that was,
Yeah.
it wasn't like
felt like a
it wasn't
monologue.
like
It didn't feel
chasing
like
him
a
into an
confession of
airport or
love.
anything.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was like, I was like, oh, this is really meaningful. Like, she's recognized that, like,
Yeah.
Despite neglecting this person horribly, she did. This person is really who she should welcome as part of her life. This person should be
She
her.
made a logical realization, and she's like, giving him the results of
This
that
is
calculation.
as close as
that monologue,
as Alex Garland can get to a love story. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I guess.
I'm
By
gonna
the
take what
way,
I can get.
I know you didn't like the way people are performing, but I really did like Sonuya Mizuno in the show. She is a fantastic actress. I don't know if you guys saw Maniac. Maniac, a Cary Fukunaga TV show. It's on Netflix. Nobody's seen it. It's astounding to me. But she is really good in that show, and she is also she was the dance double for Natalie Portman in Annihilation too. Like she was humanoid. Yeah.
Nice.
So she is like
And
she's
she was one of the robot murderers in Ex Machina as well. So.
Yes.
And it was
Garland's
amazing. She
ties.
looks like 10 years older in that movie than she does in this show.
Yep.
Which goes to show you how much of an impact having a different haircut and also having lines can have on your perception of a character's age.
For sure.
So, Devindra, any other thoughts on the finale? It seems like you were a fan.
I enjoyed it. It didn't feel like a mind-blowing finale for me, but I found it to be a really affecting like character mood. Like this is to me ultimately Forrest's story, and we see Forrest as like a cold murderer from the first episode, and we learn why he feels that way and what's driving him with Devs. And the episode where we see what happens to his wife and his daughter is just like it's my worst nightmare. It is heartbreaking, and the fact that he is just standing there watching it.
Well,
and
they made it like so he kind of
Yeah.
caused it to.
Yeah,
It's just like,
feeling that guilt too, and also it is funny he spends so much time longing for his daughter, and like he never talks about his wife. It's like I really miss Amaya. I forget my wife's name.
Well,
But
he's
she was
got a
cool.
new girlfriend.
She was
That
cool, too.
happens.
Yeah. I mean, Allison Pill is so much better, but I cannot replace my daughter. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess I thought the ending was just so good, but I don't know that it was like the best. It was like the greatest ending for the show that preceded it. Like
Sure,
that's how I feel. Is like. I think the most hilarious response I got was on Twitter when I tweeted about this. Somebody said, "I was expecting more than San Junipero for Jeff Bezos."
It is San Junipero for Jeff Bezos. It absolutely is. It is. Or even what's the other Black Mirror with the dating people?
Mhm.
The dating app.
Simulation.
Yeah.
But just that last, I can't get that last shot out of my head, man. When because she's been through this life-altering experience, right?
Mhm.
Where this guy has basically saved her life a couple times, and she, in my opinion, Devindra, they've fallen in love a bit, and
But it's a
and then-
happy ending for her, not a happy ending for the version of the guy that spent all the time helping her. So it's
right,
just
and
also,
he's been brutally murdered, and then
He's
to be
been
able
murdered.
to be able to go
Yeah.
back in time because you're in a simulation, and then the fact that like that you're in a simulation, but no one else does, and you need to like
you're
live
you're
with
in the
that.
Matrix. You
Yeah.
took the blue pill, but
Yeah.
you didn't get any of the superpowers. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Well, you have the superpower of knowing that you're in the Matrix,
Yes.
So there's
but
that.
that's
But
not.
what does
That's
that
a.
do?
I think that's a curse.
that
I
is
think
a bit
that's-
of a curse. Yeah.
Every interaction you have with every other person except for Nick Offerman is like, this is not a real thing. This is not a real individual.
But
I mean,
but,
you just
but Jeff,
described that the reality of the machine is virtually indistinguishable
yeah,
from real
but
life.
Jeff,
so that is
Jeff,
the question.
if it looks
That
and
is the
feels
question.
and sounds the same, and the world behaves the same, then is there really a difference meaningfully?
You have no idea if
this
this is
is-
simulation right now.
Yeah.
Like,
This
that's
is
the
what
thing.
I have argued about the Matrix since it came out, was like, you're a moron if you want to see the real world. Like, it's a perfectly fine simulation world.
You're
that night-
basically Cypher, Joe Pantoliano's character from The Matrix.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
You're the
he, like,
Benedict
saw-
Arnold of The Matrix. pretty
Yeah,
much.
he saw the outside world. It sucks. And he's like, why would if it's indistinguishable, why would I not want to eat a steak? I love steak. I want to eat steak.
Well, spoiler for The Matrix, but they eventually overcome the machines in that movie.
It's about them all working together
Yeah.
too.
You don't get
Like,
steak
it-
back.
yeah.
Steak's gone.
Okay, maybe they have rat hamburgers in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, folks.
Way to wrap it around. Nice.
Well, it sounds like despite what individual feelings we had about the ending or whatever, I think we all found it to be like an extremely thought-provoking piece of work.
Mhm.
It's
Um,
fantastic. It's
yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. As Devindra said, the music, the production of it just reeks quality, and it's yeah. I mean, I found it to be a beautiful piece of art, regardless of my criticisms with how it stuck the landing or not. It's very much worth seeing, and I don't share Dave's feeling that it is tedious or off-putting to anybody. I think if you enjoy science fiction, you'll love this show. It's awesome.
I say those things, but also this is like one of my favorite things that I've watched in recent memory. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to caveat it, because I think that you could hear us like gushing about it and then watch it and then be like, what is the big deal? So I'm trying to prevent those reactions. But I agree with you, Jeff. It's a great work of art. And if you want to take a chance on something bold and daring, check out Devs, which is right now on
Yeah.
Hulu or FX on Hulu, whatever you want to call it.
By the way, if you guys like this, shout out to Mark Romanek's Never Let Me Go, which Alex Garland wrote. He wrote the screenplay for that. He was actually the guy who gave Kazuo Ishiguro the idea to like add a dose of sci-fi to Never Let Me Go, which is also, if you don't know what it's about, I'm not going to spoil it, but it does like explore like this idea of consciousness and like when is it real, when is it not. It's a beautiful movie and an amazing book, so be sure to check both out.
All right.
I think the most offensive thing that has been said this whole episode is Dave taking a shit on the Deus thing, because that was cool.
Yeah, it's
That
it's
was
like
cool,
low-key.
man.
This is Dave like saying like I knew what the Greeks how they spelled Deus, but I think it's low key cool. I don't know.
Well, feel free to tweet at us what your thoughts on the Deus reveal were. Kind of interested to hear what the general population reaction to that was. Because at the same time, I was like, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I'm also like, oh, come on, show. All right. Well, anyway.
How
If you're
dare
with it at that point, it's just like
Yeah.
I feel
Dare
like
you.
I can accept anything at that point. Yeah.
He even says it was like a little joke. Like
Yeah.
they're not. It's not trying to beat you over the head with it. But I just thought it was brilliant. It's brilliant.
Mhm.
Brilliant.
All right. And that's going to wrap us up. Thanks for listening. See you next week.